take your breath, stop in your step. Sing, is life. You're all yours. Stay on me, yes. That's still here. The fire, the spirit, is alive. Let your fire fall and cast out. Let your fire fall, your love is all. Let your fire fall and cast out the fear. Let your fire fall, your love is all I feel. Let your fire fall and cast out the fear. Let your fire fall, your love is all I feel. Oh, let your fire fall, cast out the fear. Let your fire fall, your love is all I feel. Is alive. You will take your breath, stop in yourself. Is alive. You will rock your head, still your happy there. Cast your fear. Is alive. Your spirit. Everybody's leaving me. Thank you for sticking around, Jay. Everybody doing all right tonight? You guys are more than welcome to sit down. I don't think we've had a crowd stand this long yet, so give yourself a hand, guys. Come on. For a second, I thought I was in a Baptist church. I was going to have to make you guys sit down. And make us stand up. I can say that because I used to work with them. Well, thank y'all for being here tonight. It's an honor to be here with you guys and to share my songs, my stories. I never get tired of telling my story. But when I feel like a lot of people can relate, because I feel like a lot of us have gone through a lot of the same things. I know out here in this room, the one thing we all have in common is that everybody in this room needs Jesus to fix what's broken in their life. And I wouldn't be standing here today. I wouldn't have these opportunities if my mom and dad hadn't had that relationship with Jesus at an early age, and had they not brought me up in church and raised me to know that there was a God that sent his son to die for my sins, and that even though there was a number of years of my life that I spent running as far and as fast as I could from all of that, he was running faster. And so I like to thank him every night, and just maybe, if I can, encourage you parents out there that have loved ones or sons or daughters. Maybe you've got a prodigal child right now that's kind of been raised in church, but they've kind of gone off to discover or think they can discover something better than what's out there. Most of us good. We think we know more than our mom and dads. I just want to encourage you to keep praying, to keep trusting. We live in a society today where we want to see God work immediately. I'm guilty of it. I want to pray and then see God answer that prayer, the next day. And sometimes it takes years. My mom and dad brought me up in church. I was 33 years old when I gave my life to the Lord. So I'm living proof that 33-year-old prodigal growing up as a kid. My dad was a musician. He led worship at church, played bands growing up. There was a guitar in our house. There was a music stand. I walked by it all the time. I never had any interest in picking up the guitar and playing it. If I'm being honest with you, I should have retired from the Milwaukee Bucks a few years ago. But it didn't work out that way. I made some bad decisions in high school. Started using alcohol, drugs in junior high, senior high year. I got in trouble with for drug use. My senior year, I lost 2 Division I basketball scholarships. And I dropped out of high school my senior year at Christmas break. I got a GED and I went to work for my dad's construction company. So that's why I said I should go back and tell my teachers that I wrote a book. They would get a kick out of that. And I just thought my life was over. I thought, man, I worked so hard to be what I wanted to be in life. It was gone in just a split second. And I didn't have anybody to blame because I had an amazing mom and dad and family and support and this community around me. Just made some bad decisions. But thankfully, God was still looking out for me, still had a plan for my life. A year later, I walked on to a junior college in Northwest Arkansas. I made the basketball team. I got a full scholarship. And I moved 4 hours away from home. And I still hadn't learned my lesson though, because when I started college and the party started, I was that guy. I wanted to be the first one there, the last one to leave. 110%. I wanted to be the best guy at that party. That's just how I lived my life. And the day before our freshman season started, I was in a walkthrough practice. We were just running some plays for the game the next day, and I didn't lace my tennis shoes up, and we were goofing off. A buddy of mine went up to shoot a layup, and I jumped up to block it, and I landed on his foot. I tore all the ligaments in my ankle, and I was out for the whole season. And I just thought, oh, here we are again, like, it's over with. My roommate had this old guitar in the corner of our apartment. And I remember picking up his guitar for the first time, and just when I held that guitar in my hand thinking, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Just something so familiar about the guitar. And so I sat on the edge of my bed that freshman year with a guitar chord chart posted to my wall, and I taught myself how to play guitar chords. And the next semester I took a creative writing class and started writing poetry. Maybe I hope my creative writing teacher isn't here tonight. I'm going to tell him myself, but I got a little late one day on some subjects, on some projects that I was supposed to turn in, and I turned in a Creed song. And either he was a fan or he didn't know who Creed was, but I got an A on that poem. Yeah. So they got me to thinking, hey, I can turn this poetry into songs. And so I started trying to write music. I thought to myself, oh, if I get good enough on the guitar and writing music, I can be a rock star because I like to party all the time. And so that's just kind of where my head was. Fortunately, I carried that with me for a number of years of my life. I carried it into my marriage, into being a father and a husband and a son and a friend. And I was not a good person. I was arrogant. I thought about nobody but myself. And I remember my dad and me were working together. He had a construction company, and I was working with him. And there were a lot of days on that job site where I didn't show up for work. And my dad, he would still pay me. I would show up hungover. He would still take care of me, pay me. It was never judgment. And I've used his grace so much, but he loved me. My mom and dad just loved me through that. And they were always there for the conversation. And I can remember sitting on job sites with my dad over and over when I was going through this bad part of my life. And he would say, Zach, I don't have an answer for you other than Jesus. That's the only thing that can fix what's going on in your life. At the time, I didn't want to hear it, but I knew he was right. I mean, I'd been raised in church. I was living this other life. I was carrying around so much guilt and so much shame about the stuff that I was doing and what was going on. I remember in 2012, I was getting ready to leave to go to Europe for a month in the summer and play music. And my wife came to me. We had 3 children at the time and a daughter on the way. And she said, Zach, I can't do this. If you can't make some changes for your family, we're out. We're not sticking around. You might end up killing yourself. I don't want to be a part of this. And I didn't want to see my family leave. I didn't want to have my kids raised by somebody. I was just like, I don't want this to happen, but I can't fix it, you know? And like I said, I tried everything but Jesus. And so I started thinking about this Jesus that my mom and dad had brought me up to know. I remember saying, God, if you're real, if you're who you say you are, and you can prove it, I'll walk away from all this and leave it all. We leave to go to Europe that summer, and we're about 2 weeks into the tour. We were driving across Spain one day, and I was reading a book and listening to some music on my headphones. We were just driving down the highway. I was staring out the window, and all my band guys were sleeping, and I took my headphones off, and I closed my book, and I was just looking out the window. The guy driving our bus was scanning radio stations, and out of nowhere, it just stops on the station. It's playing a song by Big Daddy Weed called Redeemed. And I was like, what are the chances, you know? It wasn't a coincidence. It got my attention, and I listened to those lyrics. And I got to my hotel room, and I listened to the lyrics, and I looked up the lyrics. I just remember being in that moment and realizing, like, all those years in church, like growing up as a kid, I had a different idea of who I thought God was. Like, I thought God just sat on his throne all day, you know, with his arms crossed, just staring at everything that Zach did wrong, shaking his head. I didn't truly understand how much he loved me and what he had sacrificed for me. And I realized in that song that he sees me in a way that I can't see myself, that I'll never see myself. He sees us all in a way we'll never see ourselves. And I called my wife and I said, Crystal, I'm done. I'm coming home. She was like, well, you didn't say I'm done 2 nights ago. Well, trust me, I'm done. I had to come to Jesus meeting, and I'm done. I remember coming home from that tour, and I quit my band. I canceled the rest of my shows. I gave my life to the Lord in the floor of my closet on June 10th of 2012, and me and my wife never looked back. And I say all that to say, I'm still not perfect. I'm never going to be. Who is, you know? I'm still working every day. But I remember when we started trying to find this church to go to. If you've ever been to Arkansas, there's plenty of churches to choose from. This is what they call the Bible Belt. And there was this one church, this big white Southern Baptist church, this big steeple, thousands of people went to it. Everybody called it Six Flags Over Jesus. And I was like, I ain't going there. I'm not going to that church. And that's where we ended up going to church. And I think for me, the biggest reason is because I'd grown up going to churches, and then whenever I spent 15, 20 years of my life not going to churches after I became an adult, the only time I would go to church was like Mother's Day, Easter, Christmas, stuff like that. My parents would beg me to come, and I would go. And then the pastor would look me up and down, and I would be judged before I ever found my seat. And I got so sick of that I quit going to church. When I walked into this church this time, I just remember thinking, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. They loved on us. They accepted us for who we were. They let us tell our stories. Before I knew it, the worship pastor in church said, hey, will you sing a song one Sunday? And I chose Redeemed by Big Daddy Weed. It's the first song I ever sang at church. And about a year into us going to this church, the lead pastor of the church came to me and my wife one day after church, and he said, hey, we've just been watching you guys for the last year, and we just noticed God's done a pretty amazing work in y'all's life. And he said, we want to start a campus here. We wanted to start it for a long time. We've just not had the right people to be involved. And he said, we want to reach out to some people that we feel like we can't, but with your story, we feel like we can reach out to them. Would you guys be interested in coming to work for the church? And I was like, man, I was like, dude, I'm not a worship leader. And he was like, no kidding. But he was like, I feel like God put you here for a reason. There was a big Celebrate Recovery ministry at the church. There was a big, it was like a biker church that met there. There was a cowboy church that met, and then there was some folks that had been in and out of prison that were coming to church, but they just hadn't gotten connected or found their place. And so we started this campus called The Refuge. I started writing songs after hearing a lot of these folks' stories and sharing my songs and sharing my stories with them as well. And it wasn't long after that till I got invited to Nashville to write some music. And ended up on I think it was my third trip back and forth to Nashville. I wrote a song called Chainbreaker with some friends. And thank you. And my dad and me were still working together at the time. And it was, to be honest, it was some of the sweetest times I've ever had working with my dad, because it was like one of the first times we actually had things in common again. Since I was a kid, like we were talking about music, Christian music, I was playing songs that I was writing, telling me stories and things about his life that I've never heard. And I remember one day we were on this job site and I was playing him some music that I'd been writing, and we stopped to take a lunch break. And we stepped outside and there was a stack of sheetrock. It was about 100 degrees in Arkansas, and it's pretty hot. I don't know if you guys get to 100 degrees here. It was hot. We got to this garage to sit down and take a lunch break. And I remember it because my gourmet lunch for the day was Vienna sausages, Funyuns, and a Mountain Dew. I gotta ask y'all, I ask every night, and I'm always right, but how do you guys say that? Is it Vienna or Vienna?
Vienna.
I told you guys. Well, I'm kind of redneck. This will even push it over the edge. The show of hands has done this. I didn't have a fork that day, so I just picked up a 16-penny nail off the carport and started stabbing right out. So we got one down here. But anyway, it got really serious after that. And I remember my dad, he just looked at me and said, "Zach, I gotta tell you something I never told you before." And I was like, "Okay." He said, "You know, me and your mom met in high school." He said, "We got married really young, honestly too young." He said, "Right out of high school." He said, "We started running around and partying, got mixed up in some of the stuff that you and your wife had been going through." And he said, "When it came time to start a family, your mom was ready to slow down." And he said, "I just wasn't ready for the party again." He said, "We ended up separated for about 6 months." He said, "And while we were separated," he said, "I ended up finding the Lord. You know, I met the Lord, and He brought me and your mother back together and just restored our marriage." And he said, "We made a promise that if we ever had children, we would raise them in church. We would teach them to know Jesus." And he said, "So we just decided the best thing for us to do would be move away from this small town in Arkansas and all these people that we run around with, start fresh." My dad had decided he wanted to go to Bible college, so they moved to Pensacola, Florida. About 2 years later, I was born. And so they had decided to have me dedicated at this church service one Sunday morning. So they got me all ready for church. He says, "We're walking down the aisle. As we're walking down," he said, "You started screaming and crying or hollering, making all this noise and fussing." And he said, out of nowhere, he said, "The pastor just said, 'Man, it sounds like Zach's got a strong set of lungs. He'll probably be a singer one day.'" And everybody laughed. My dad said, he said, "The preacher looked at my mom and dad and said, 'This child will be a voice for his generation.'" And, I was young, you know. I was listening to this story for the first time. I was 33 years old. I'm looking at my dad, he's crying. I'll still cry telling the story. I said, "Dad, why have you never told me this story before?" He just looked at me and said, "Well, I didn't want to put any pressure on you." He said, "Me and your mom used to think about it." He said, "When you were growing up, you never showed any interest in music." He said, "We always thought, what did the preacher mean whenever he spoke those words over you? You know, we couldn't understand it." He said, "You've always been a leader, you know, people seem to follow you." And he said, "You always just kind of were naturally a leader." He said, "But you never were interested in music, so I just wondered what did he mean." He said, "But then you came home your freshman year of college and you said, 'Dad, I'm taking your guitar back. I'm going to teach myself how to play music.'" He said, "I thought, well, you don't pick up a guitar at 19, 20 years old and start playing music." He said, "You came home a year later and you were actually pretty good and you started writing songs and they just kept getting better and better and better. And your mom started thinking, maybe the pastor meant it." He said, "And then got into this rock band and we just watched you sink into a lifestyle that we hadn't raised you to live, you know, and we watched you go through this for the next 15 years of your life." Man, my parents, they used to come and they used to sit out at my shows and smoky bar rooms and nightclubs while I got just absolutely hammered on stage every night. You know, my mom and dad would make sure I could get home okay, or come by my house in the morning and pray for me and my wife. You know, it was always something. Dad said, "Me and your mom used to sit out there every night And we just pray that one day God would take all of this stuff that's going on in your life and use it for His glory. He said, I'm not telling you now to put pressure on you. He said, I'm telling you because God's giving you a huge opportunity, a huge gift. Write these songs, he said, they have a chance of changing people's lives and their hearts in the way the music has changed yours. And he said, I feel like God allowed you to live through some dark days so that you can stand on stages just like this tonight and share with you guys just how good God is and how much He loves you, you know? And it's nothing that we can do to earn His love, you know? He already loves us, and He's already given His life for us. I get beside myself sometimes thinking about it because I'm always like, I'm not worthy or deserving of the things God's done in my life. You know, I'm still a mess, you know? I get it wrong more than I get it right. But I'm just reminded over and over of Scripture when I look back and I see all the messed up people, all the broken people that God used to do His work. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned in the last few years is God just wants to hear you say yes. You know, and I think the biggest reason that we say no is because we feel unqualified. You know, we feel like we have the tools to go do what He's asking us to do. And if we're honest, we probably don't. The second we say yes, God gives us the tools that we need. He qualifies us to go do those jobs. He has a plan designed specifically for each and every one of our lives if you just say yes. My favorite Bible verse growing up as a kid, still to this day, has always been Jeremiah 29:11. It says, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, to prosper you, not to harm you, and hope in the future. This song's called Plan for Me.